Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of the Imaginary Movie Podcast, a podcast wherein me and my idiot friends watch a movie and then we talk about it. My name's David, and yippee-ki-yay, mother buckets!
Oh, well done. Well done.
Nice one, Dave. Yeah, Die Hard with a Vengeance. It's Die Hard on a street, subway, stadium, bank, tunnel, boat, helicopter, and Canada.
By the way, audience, I just told him those locations because he couldn't remember any of them.
Thank you, Dave.
He fell asleep twice.
I really actually did. Probably more than that.
And I'm Ross. Who was the 21st president of the United States? Go fuck yourself, that's who. The best two
Who
lines
was
of
the
dialogue.
21st president of the United States? Anyone know?
Dude, I watched this movie and I still couldn't tell you.
I really hoped that was going to be somehow resolved, answered.
It was.
It wasn't.
It was.
Was it?
It was. It was Chester B. Arthur, and the school was Chester B. Arthur School. That's where the bomb was.
I believe it's Chester A. Arthur. Not B.
I'm
Arthur.
sorry, Sam.
That was the
Grammar police here.
That was his second brother. Yeah. So what film are we watching this week? We watched Die Hard with a Vengeance for some reason. Of all the Die Hard movies we could have watched, we decided to watch this one. Gonna put that squarely in Ross's court. Ross, gonna defend yourself. Why did we watch this?
Absolutely.
Can I say before Ross gives us his rebuttal?
Ross, and over to Dave.
I'm really glad we didn't watch the next one. Or it is a 5? Is there a 5? Die Hard so very old.
Oh yeah, there's Die Hard, Die Hard 2, Die Harder, Die Hard with Vengeance, no number, right? Then we have then we have Die Hard 4.0, so we're back on numbers again. Then we have Die Hard, A Good Day to Die Hard, numbers gone again. It's like Fast and the Furious. Are we doing numbers sometimes? Yes, no, who cares?
keep them on the toes. I think
this kind of is at that Fast and Furious level of like action movies that kind of like. The first one is really excellent, and why didn't we watch that? The first one is a fantastic like example of the genre that kind of redefined a lot of things and kind of established this schlubby guy as a hero.
I'll tell
you. The
rest
rest of these movies, Ross, are like, hey, do you reckon we could get more money out of that like fucking dead horse over there? Yep, cast me that stick.
I'm not having this. I'm not having this. I will not have this, okay? So first of all, to address your point, Dave, the reason we had it is because one of the parameters for choosing movies was select a sequel. I selected a sequel, God damn you, and be thankful I didn't select Die Hard 4.0, where, and I shit you not, Bruce Willis kills a helicopter with a motorbike, all right? So I think a little bit of gratitude... Kills. I think a little bit of gratitude wouldn't go amiss. Sam, to answer your question...
About 20 minutes ago, before Dave interjected.
Before Dave had something to say,
yeah.
I stand 100% behind this movie.
Mm-hmm.
I will defend it to the end. Now, having said that, let me flip-flop here. When you were watching it and you were texting us on the group chat along with it, all the critiques and the gripes both you guys had, yeah, absolutely, I cannot contest it. However, this is one of those movies, like we've had these in the past, where when you're younger and you're watching it, your mind sort of doesn't register all these flaws. And then as you grow up with it, your mind glazes over these flaws then. Mm-hmm. And this is one of the movies where Sam, you went, God, this is a bit long. And I was thinking, like, yeah, he's got a point. It does run a bit long, but still, awesome movie. And then... when Sam, you said you woke up and now he's in Canada.
Genuinely, I felt no, and you know, it was late. I was tired, and me falling asleep watching a movie is not an unreasonable thing to do. I have 2 young children, like that's fine. But usually, you could I'll just skip back to it's fine. I've missed 5 minutes or so. What could have happened in 5 minutes that would make the rest of the movie utterly incomprehensible?
Yep. But and that's the other thing I wanted to mention. That's specifically where you said, I fell asleep and now I don't know where I am. That's one of the great things about Die Hard, because during my childhood, it'd be on like RT1, Network 2, or one of them ones, and it would start at 9
foreign
o'clock.
Channels.
Yes. Radio Telefish Erin at Gilliga Mochara. So, but this would be one of those things where the movie would start maybe at 9 o'clock at night, right? Now, 2 hour runtime, fine, done by 11. However, then you have adverts. Dave is even rubbing his eyes now at this explanation.
Just thinking about how long this movie was.
Then you have adverts, and then like you guys probably had it like maybe BBC or ITV, where it was one of those things where they pause the movie halfway through for the news.
For the news.
And the point I'm getting at is you would fall asleep and you'd be like, okay, well, that's the movie over, but you still got a good chunk of action. Like if I watch an hour of it, wow, what a great movie. Or you could come in from a night out, it's maybe 12:30 at night, Die Hard's on, there's about half an hour left. Oh, sweet, Die Hard. It's one of those movies where no matter where you pick it up, you're in for a great fun time.
You're in.
If you say so, I would posit that the first hour of this movie is really good, and the last 20 minutes is trash. We'll get into it. Sam, give us a plot summary.
A plot summary for the movie Die Hard, as my IMDb.
A deranged suspended police officer in the NYPD brutally murders 13 people.
Yeah.
It's not that far enough. John McClane and Harlem store owner Zeus, who doesn't have his name on there, which is a bit rude, are targeted by German terrorists in New York City, where the German terrorist Simon plans to rob the Federal Reserve building. A few things I want to talk about there. Jeremy
Irons, bad guy.
Jeremy Irons. I'm not a big Jeremy Irons fan. Generally, movies. I don't particularly like his stick.
I am.
This is why I'm a big Jeremy Irons fan. This is the first thing I probably saw him in, other than Scar. In The Lion King.
And like
yes, I fucking liked it.
Do you know what I thought? I thought this at the start. I thought, right, so this guy is obviously Jeremy Irons. He's incredibly British. It's just really, it's got that very distinctive.
Brilliant though.
What? Are you insane?
No? Ross, are you literally brain dead? Were you in an accident we don't know about?
He did the German accent.
Can you hear sounds?
An accent.
What accent do you think Sam and I have?
I told you what kind of accent
you have. Podcast you were Italian blokes, their sound though.
You were all, oh, hello, oh, spot of tea, oh, wonderful, crumpets. That's how you all sound to me. Right?
So bigoted, Ross, unbelievably. Right, so...
I don't judge you for it.
Hold on. Because there's a couple of things that's come up in this conversation so far. Number one is runtime, but we'll come back to that. Let's just focus on this accent, because I think... This is insane. I thought that he was a British character pretending to occasionally be German, to like mess with John McClane and to kind of just spice things up a little bit. The accent swings from fucking Austria to France, and everything in between. There doesn't seem to be any consistency. I hate
there isn't, Sam,
this.
Because this is one of the most. Let's talk about Jeremy Irons for a minute, because this seems like the time to do it. Right, this is one of the most underwritten villains in a Die Hard film. And the reason for that
is... Wait till you watch 4 and 5.
Going on behind the scenes in this, Jeremy Irons and all of his mates, they are all ex-East German soldiers, right? So, for non-history fans out there, East Germany was a country up until 1991, right? So they had their own army, and the idea is this takes place in 1995. Jeremy Irons is leading this gang of soldiers, and he says at the end, and that's the only fucking time we get any idea of what's going on, he says at the end that we are an army without a state, and that in a line I actually quite liked, and he does this speech and he goes, let's decide which fucking country we're buying, and that's a fun bit. But that's the only point at which it's like, oh, these are a bunch of East German mercenaries who are communism's fallen and they're at a loose end. Fucking tell me that in minute 12 of this movie. And then any of it makes sense. It doesn't matter that he's East German. It is so inconsequential to the plot. He could be British.
I have to jump in here. I think you're being on... I'm going to be standing up for Die Hard, I think, a lot during this episode, and I think you're being
Ross,
unfair.
do you actually have a defense here?
Yes, I think
filibuster. He's filibustering.
I think you're being unfairly harsh. It's a mid-90s action movie. You're looking for fucking Othello, where we have massively developed characters and backstory. It's 2 hours already, Dave. What do you want? Do you want a shorter runtime, or do you want character arcs? You can't have both in a 90s action movie.
I'm sorry.
The history of cinema, Ross, has told me that I can have character development in 90 minutes.
In the 90s.
And the story
with Bruce
Willis.
Yes,
Ross. Yes, Ross. We have had movies with character development shorter than this movie for 80 years.
We've had We've had a Die Hard movie that manages to achieve what you're asking for, because we get in the first Die Hard, which is obviously way ahead of everything else that's followed it, and they're never going to reach that point. But at least in the first Die Hard movie, we understand what the characters want. And yes, it's money, but it's also just like he kind of wants to make a point as well. Hans Gruber, he's there to make a point as much as anything else, and he's a character who has an internal drive. He's a character who clearly demonstrates what he wants, and we understand his motivation. And we kind of also know that he's a psychopath, but he's also quite, he's an intellectual psychopath. There's all these things that are running through that you can just...
There's a plan. The reason that Hans Gruber in Die Hard, the OG, is doing what he's doing is so he can get this money and get away clean. That is the plan, right?
He avoids shooting people.
Fucking Chris Gruber or Simon Gruber or whatever the fuck this guy's name is, right? His plan is to steal, just spoilers, I guess, the entire gold reserves stored at the Federal Reserve. It's something like $187 billion in gold.
Please, I can't do it yet.
Steal that and somehow fucking rock up to the Sudan or something and be like, I've got 18 trucks piled with gold. I want your country. And that's somehow going to be like, oh yeah, great. Oh, well, actually, no. Gold is worthless now since you stole the entire world's fucking supply.
Please stop, because I'm gonna have an aneurysm if we talk about this too early, right? Because it's just the stupid. It's actually one of the stupidest things I've ever seen in a film. But let's hold that for a second, because I think what it gets to is it gets to the beginning of this movie. It gets to the start of this movie, and as you say, Ross, in the first hour, I am like, loving this. This is great. This is running around New York, and you've got this Simon Says thing on the phone. Like, there's lots of...
speed. It's speed for an hour and 10 minutes.
Yes, and that's because much like almost all action movies in the 90s, these films were individual scripts which were turned into your kind of franchise movies. So I
believe
think
this was based on a book, actually, as well. This original script.
Yeah, so I think it started off. There was one. So there was one script that was similar to this, where there was McClane was fighting terrorists on a Caribbean cruise line, but was rejected for being too similar to Under Siege. What does that film sound like?
Speed 2.
That's what it turned into, because you get these individual scripts, and by somebody who's very talented says, "Oh, I'm going to make an action movie," and then they just, rather than rely on a new franchise, they just slap on an existing one. So a similar type of thing with this, where it's kind of like you got the Simon Says element, and then later on it kind of gets a bit more confusing. But we'll come to that. But the first part of this movie, I think, is actually really good. It's really, really good. It's really compelling.
The speed section of this movie is really excellent.
You're like, what's going to happen next? And then he's taking the subway and the sandwich board thing, which is just fucking wild. But again, let's maybe come to that in a second. But I think the problem is that at the start of Die Hard 1, you know the trajectory. You can see where they're going, and you can see that there's a beginning, a middle, and end to the story. I actually don't think this story has like a consistent beginning, middle, and end, which is really weird, because most stories that get to this point and have hundreds of millions of dollars have a clear structure to follow, and this film doesn't. It's just all over the place, other than the first hour, which is self-contained, quite good. So,
let's talk about the plot, like the actual like contrivances of the plot a little bit. Maybe we can talk about some of the casts. I mean, there's only really like two people in this cast we want to talk about.
There's only, two or three. Yeah.
I assume we're going to talk about Bruce Willis and Samuel L. Jackson, and that's it.
Yeah, pretty much.
But we can, like you said, Sam, we kind of get this movie. So we have like Speed, very, very like Speed. They get a phone call. I planted that bomb that went off. Much like in Speed when the bus blows up. I want this
The
cop.
bus that couldn't slow down. Carry on.
Exactly, the school that couldn't not blow up.
Yeah.
It's fine, Sam. I'm there for you. So they get a phone call that's like, I want John McClane, blah blah blah. I want him to do this and demands. I'm like, number one, fucking the police department isn't giving in to bombers' demands. That's fucking on rule 1 of being a cop. Do not give terrorist demands. Don't give in to terrorist demands. Anyway,
Yeah.
And then we get like the introduction of the Samuel L. Jackson character, who is just like he runs an electric store in Harlem. He's righteously angry at the white man, quite reasonably. We get Bruce Willis come down with his sandwich board, which you've all seen the movie, so we're not going to repeat it here.
Well, hold on, though. Hold on. Because I think it is a strong opening to a film, isn't it?
It's tense. It conveys that very well.
Even before we get to that bit, I think the shots around New York, it's all good. Life's happy.
Rush hour traffic. Yeah.
It's pre 9/11. We're all good. And then within about a minute, you get this great explosion of this shop, and then suddenly, and I think that's a really strong opening to the film. I think I was hooked. I was like, wow. So this is where we're at, and then we get to see it all kind of, the police doing their thing. We've talked a little bit in the past, I think, about propaganda, or it's something that we've certainly come up with some other podcasts.
We haven't used the term before because
have we not? But basically,
the podcast.
Yeah, basically, the promotion of the police through cinema. And boy, does this film, like, as much as it's trying to be, it's also it pretty much shows the police as being utterly useless.
Except John McClane, whose personal version of again, like, and it's kind of not what the movies are about. Like in Die Hard 1, it made sense for John McClane to be like, "Oh, I've got to kill these people, or they're going to kill all of us," etc., etc. In this movie, he is driving around New York, popping caps in people, like it's like it's the 4th of July.
He's a one-man army.
He's given up. Is what's happening.
He is not trying to arrest.
He does not care.
And like serious PTSD going on in here, but like it is propaganda in that John McClane is a cop. And he's cool as fuck. He's the hero. He's the guy you're going to call. He's going to get things done, by which he means he's going to come in and execute 13 people like he does in this movie. But yeah, propaganda is definitely a term we should be more aware of. And like talking about Speed, that's a movie about the cops being fucking amazing. Like, renegade cops who don't follow the rules. Like, no, those are the ones who kill people and go to prison. Like, seriously,
follow the rules.
The rules exist for a reason.
He gets results though. Yeah, the results aren't great. Yeah. I gotta be honest.
40 dead, and we managed to book a shoplifter. Like, okay, well,
we got him 40 million pounds in property damage.
The podcast isn't about this movie, but I was watching Rush Hour last night, and just when you mentioned propaganda, have you guys seen Rush Hour?
Yes.
Yeah. No. So for
I like those movies.
Oh, I loved it, but then I was watching
Jackie Chan and Owen Wilson, or is that?
That's Shanghai Nights. Anyway, well, I'll come back to it in a second. But essentially, in the first 10 minutes, Chris Tucker, the cop, is shooting at a fleeing suspect who has C4 in the trunk of his car. Shoots him several times in the middle of the street, and then he's aiming at the C4, and just luckily, the guy jumps out of the car. He pulls the trigger. The car blows up, and he has a little dance in the middle of the street, and then goes over to arrest him. I just think this is a lawyer's wet dream. You're fucked. Your badge is done.
The best example of propaganda is Bad Boys. That is the most egregious example of people committing war crimes.
And Lethal Weapon.
And Lethal Weapon, actually, yeah. And this movie is very Lethal Weapon-y, I would say.
Yes. And Die Hard.
Anyway, so the propaganda of it all that we're going to get into more as we go along. But it's definitely relevant.
But it is this thing of like in the start of the movie, we see this Simon Says stuff, which I think is actually quite a cool concept for a film of him saying
it was cool in Speed, and it works here also. It was
great in Speed. You must deliver the must go to the payphone, but they don't even Jeremy Irons doing his thing.
Jeremy Irons could have phoned this performance in, honestly. Like,
well,
he is on screen with Bruce Wayne twice, maybe.
Yeah.
I didn't know he could do a correspondence course in appearing in Die Hard with a Vengeance, but damned if he did.
But I do like the introduction of Samuel L. Jackson into this, because I think it's a good they kind of lean on the racial stuff quite a lot, which I think is for the most part seems to be from a kind of good-natured point of view in terms of
that I was going to have to contest, because again, when I was watching it through the podcast lens, I was thinking it felt like what they were trying to do is but what if the black guy was racist? Bet you didn't think of that. They really leaned in on that. Like,
it could go both ways, though, Ross. They could be. This movie was made by a bunch of white guys, I presume, almost certainty, because Hollywood is very bunch of white guys.
That's a sure bet.
I don't think Vegas is putting long odds on that. This was definitely made by a bunch of white dudes, and I think you are right, Ross. I think there maybe is an element of that, or there was an element of that in 1995. But I also think that me watching it in 2021, actually what it came across as, I was like, oh, all of this character, Zeus's quite legitimate grievances against the white people who are making, the lives of minorities and people of color horrible. And his justification for saving McClane's life as well later on, where he sort of reveals it, because he gets he stops McClane being sort of lynched by this gang on the street, and he says to him later, he says I didn't save your life because you're a cop and all that. Well, I saved your life because if they had killed a white cop in Harlem, a lot of black people would have died, and that is that's actual commentary on a racial tension.
Mm-hmm.
Good commentary in a fucking Die Hard movie.
See, this is why, and to be fair, as it goes along, you get a lot of Bruce Willis saying to Samuel Jackson, "Man, you're the racist," which I don't necessarily like as much, but actually the introduction I think works well. You get the bit when they're you do get a little bit of he's not like other, black people. He's kind of, because he's saying, don't steal radios and this, as if that's what everyone else is doing, and he's the shining light that's not. But
there is that 1995 bit where we have to prove that this black guy isn't a criminal, and it's like, do we though?
Yeah.
Do we?
Yeah, I know. It's like,
should that be a thing that we're doing?
Do we have to point out all the other people who aren't criminals too? in a film full of criminals, do we need to do that? But it's not really for us to maybe make that judgment. But I actually thought that as an introduction to the character, it worked well. We understood who he was. We understood his kind of his drive, which was very much get out of my neighborhood, leave my community alone, and please never come back. And that, as the film progresses, develops into, for some reason, he's in Canada.
The fact that Samuel L. Jackson is in this helicopter in the movie is perhaps the most egregious plot hole in the entire movie.
Oh no, there's way more worse than that, but definitely it's up there in terms of...
is Canada okay with you violating their sovereign rights by taking a military force into their country?
Who can tell? Who can tell? But then we get this sandwich board incident, this thing with and we'll probably skip ahead quite significantly after this bit because it kind of gets more of the same. But you text ahead, Ross. You were saying, "Wait for the sandwich board," and I was like, "What? That's weird. That's a weird thing to say about a Bruce Willis action movie. What could possibly be coming up? That's good."
Well, it's because you text Sam at 2 minutes, and you went, "Wow," and I was like, "Oh, he's come."
That was the explosion. That was the explosion that I liked.
Yeah,
but when he's got this sandwich board on and you don't see what it says on the sandwich board for a long time, there's quite a few shots where you...
pretty decent filmmaking here. They hold off enough that you're liking that. We can talk about maybe it's a bit of a misstep or whatever, but actually I think the tension throughout this, just this first bit, until you see what the sandwich board says. Because it's so well done.
Because I mean, and what could it possibly be? What could it possibly be that this Simon guy, that this German / Italian / Portuguese / Austrian is speaking down the phone? What could it? Ross is writing notes. What could it possibly be that's got on it? And then when we get the reveal. it is shocking. It is very, very shocking. I think it's weird though. I think it's a weird thing to have in your movie. Like, just conceptually to come up with that, and then to think, yeah, we can shoot that, and then to get Bruce Willis, one of the most famous action movie stars in the world, to put that on, and presumably they shot that on location. I'm not quite sure, or even if they didn't, there would be lots of people hanging around. Like, that's quite a big ask. I wonder what the contractual terms of that were. Did he get any more money for having to wear that offensive?
I'm wondering, is it back end? Go on, Ross.
I was going to say, I'm wondering, is that part of maybe, Dave, you said this was based in the book. Was that specifically in the book? And, some of the film execs were like, this, we want this in the movie?
No, because I think in earlier versions of the script, the Samuel L. Jackson character was going to be a woman initially. And I think it was going to be a different. So I think that it was always going to be a buddy cop from the initial script. And as usual, none of this has any basis other than what I vaguely remember from what I read last week. But it was supposed to be a woman, and then I think this scene is like, basically, I think Simon was going to send him to a really bad neighborhood, blah blah blah, and I hope he got killed or beaten to death or whatever. And then this, I think what the sandwich board says, I think is a direct reaction to them casting Samuel L. Jackson. By the way, just a bit trivia: they wanted Lawrence Fishburne for this, and he passed on it. Yeah,
kicking himself.
Well, no, he got caught in fact because apparently he'd said he'd do it. And then someone at the studio said, he's not interested. So they cast Samuel L. Jackson, and then he took him to court for money because he thought he had a handshake agreement on it.
I was just looking up the sandwich board stuff. So apparently what they did is they actually shot there was the sandwich board actually said, "I hate everybody." And then they digitally edited it in post so that Bruce Willis didn't have to walk around Harlem with that one.
See, I was going to say, because
when
I mentioned I was watching this, on the Irish TV channels, like in my youth, I don't remember it saying
no way
the N-word.
No way is that going on TV. No.
This is not. This is getting edited for TV. We should do an episode, by the way, on the podcast. We should definitely do an episode of things that are edited for TV, because there's a conversation to be had there of like stuff that's changed.
First off, Terminator 2.
Well, quite frequently, there's like not whole redubs, but they will redub all of the like F words, for instance, with like a non swear word. But this isn't a podcast for that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But so the start of this movie, and as we progress through the rest of the kind of Simon Says stuff, we've got the telephone, we've got the payphone thing, which is I think it's pretty cool. Like, you can see that this guy's a psychopath, and you get to see again, Dave, you get to see the speedness of like, I'm just going to mess with you a little bit, and it's all very fun. We then progress to the subway stuff. I think the subway chase and the kind of him running through the subway looking for the police phone with the bomb in it is all fairly entertaining and perfectly cromulent. Like, it's all pretty good. I'm quite happy with it. Up to this point. And you kind of I think maybe where after the subway explosion and they all come up, from the subway, and where the movie dies for me is after about an hour, they're sitting in this fucking van with Agent Twat and CIA, and
yeah,
the FBI guy, and we just get this just awful exposition scene. This just terrible scene.
Because this movie has to do the fucking heavy lifting here, and I agree, Sam. I think that up until that is where the movie's at its best. Like, it's tense, it's quick, like there's loads of action, it's fun. We get car chases and explosions and people getting shot, and like it's very like quick fire, and you're kind of along for the ride. When the movie fucking stops dead, when the subway's blown up, for the CIA to say there's a bomb in a school, we know who he is, blah blah blah, and then you have the because in that point as well, they've got to fucking uninvent the radio. So they've got to establish that the police can't use their radios. They've got to establish that the entire police force and the Coast Guard and the garbage men and the fucking railway operators and the bus drivers and the fucking children too. Everyone is going to be searching these schools, and like that scene goes on for 25 minutes of like, oh, and the crossing guards, they'll be there too. Oh, and you know those people who stand on the corner selling the big issue, them too. There'll be no one in New York who's fucking can possibly like notice a bunch of guys robbing $187 billion in gold bullion. So like they establish all that, and then they establish that there's only radios, and then we have to have a scene where we're introduced to the fucking switchboard operators.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's been 25 minutes since I've seen any of the two main characters. The plot has not moved forward. I've still yet to understand what the baddies are after. And like, you are right, Sam, the movie just stops dead to fucking dump all of this out.
Yeah, it's a confusing choice. It's a confusing choice. And then I think this is probably where as we've said, the film kind of dies a death for me, and I wonder where else you could go from here. If you don't go down to this route of the whole school thing and the whole gold bullion thing, like.
Well, should we save that for the end, Sam? When we usually try and quote unquote fix the movie. I mean, I don't think we need to, because I think the movie's brilliant.
So what's your view then, Ross, in terms of this first hour? We're agreeing is good. I think that's consensus. Everyone, yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. No one's disagreeing.
We're arguing it dies a death when we actually get to like probably the substance of the movie, though. So why is there any thoughts on that?
You're asking me if I have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I'm asking you to podcast, Ross. Can you do that for me?
Well, like I've said, this is a movie from the childhood. So the glaring issues you guys are seeing now, they feel like minor, trivial, inconveniences to me. However, like when I read, like when you guys put it into text and I'm reading, I'm like, yep, they have a point. I mean, it dies the death. When they go into those I don't think sewers right, but those sewer tunnels, those massive things around the trucks. This can get there a lot faster. I mean, I can't remember if it was you or Dave, Sam, that said you don't need this school scene, and I think you're right. If the movie was going the way it does, you could get rid of that school scene, no problem. However, on the flip side of it, I was going to say if you keep the school scene, because that's quite, there's quite high stakes there, and then
school scene. Sorry, Ross.
This is where they have the bomb in the school.
Yeah.
Oh, well, we haven't gotten to that yet. We're just talking about like all the exposition you get before that, where they explain where all the cops are going to have to go.
Okay. Let's get into that then, because this is probably, so there's kind of two things going on at this point, isn't there? There's the school bombs that that we put one of these bombs, and to be fair to the movie, we do see quite early on that they obviously, the terrorists have the capability to make these bombs. We get these cool looking liquid things with timers on it. It's a nice little prop. Well done, production department.
There was purple food dye and white food dye.
yeah.
I think it was just clear liquid, Ross. But okay.
Yeah.
Well, no, it wasn't clear.
So we see all that, and then we see that so these guys are messing around. Again, you're not really sure what they want, the terrorists. They're kind of just causing havoc for the sake of it. But that kind of works because we've had a lot of that, like sadistic behavior in the Simon Says bit at the start. So it kind of works for me, and I was expecting basically to get a race against time finish to the movie where John McClane has to figure out which school is out and then, maybe the kids would come back, which we do get to see, but only in a kind of minor part. There would be some connection, perhaps, between Samuel L. Jackson, the kids, John McClane, you've got to help me save my boys, or something like that. That would.
And they kind of have all of that because his nephews are there, but like it never really ties back in. So just to like keep us on track here, and like it is confusing, let's just talk about what John McClane and Zeus are doing throughout the movie from this point, because like there's what they're doing, there's what the terrorists are doing, and there's what the police are doing, and kind of like the three threads we've got. So they go, and they, as far as they're concerned, like there's more Simon Says nonsense. Simon says, go to this fountain, there's another bomb, like you'll have to disarm it, whatever. And we get a weird, funny scene where like And this is kind of like a weird scene because it's not very tense because it's Samuel L. Jackson and Bruce Willis just like having fun with these water containers, and like the task is to like get 4 liters of water, 4 gallons of water in this jug and put it on this thing, and the bomb will deactivate.
What on earth is that? That's a cut scene. You edit that out of the movie.
No, but what it is it's like our villain, fucking Alfred Gruber.
Why didn't you edit this out of the movie, Dave? Sorry.
I don't know. I'll go back in time and do it. Alfred Gruber or whoever, he says he is basically trying to keep them busy, but like it does beg the question why he doesn't just kill them. Anyway, he's trying to keep them busy so that he's out of his way, and the police are busy because they're searching the schools. So this is like a diversion tactic so he can get up to his thing. But they can't. Bruce Willis kind of figures that out because he's cleverer than everyone else in this movie throughout, and they go back to Wall Street where they find the heist. From there, Bruce and Zeus.
Bruce and Zeus.
Bruce and Zeus.
Okay, Dave, you win today's podcast. Well done.
Absolutely. Bruce and Zeus, they go to... I mean, this is where you have the fucking water tunnel that's being built, which conveniently will drive you all the way from central New York, like, up to Canada, or wherever they're going. I can't remember what Zeus is doing while Bruce Willis is doing this.
Who could tell?
It's really hard to tell because it's so fucking long. But all of this time, the police are searching schools.
Yeah.
We get the clue from Gruber of like who's the 21st president, and that turns out to be like where the bomb is or what school it is.
Yeah, but it's what the terrorists are doing. I think is probably the most compelling, or not compelling. Sorry, it's the most important thing of the film, but it's the least compelling. Because they are everyone else is doing this other stuff, and that's what it kind of feels like, is that everyone else is doing like side quests. Like we've got all this busy work for the protagonist to do, and we've got all this busy work. Please go and I need 5 sweet rolls. Go collect me 5 sweet rolls. So that's what Bruce Willis is doing. Bruce and Zeus.
I used to be a cop like you until I took a bullet to the knee or something.
Yeah. I used to be a cop in New York, but then we all got sent to search schools with garbage men and fucking crossing guards.
So I shot people.
And I mean the scene in the school with the drama of these boys trapped inside and everyone having to, I don't have the keys, and figure, oh, have you got the keys? No, I don't have the keys.
They have to be Zeus's nephews, otherwise who could care? Who could possibly care?
I know. Like, all of that is just excruciatingly dull. It's excruciatingly dull. It's so painful because at the same time, as we get into it now, the terrorists have some grand plan, which is not unusual for this type of movie, that the terrorists are one step ahead and everything they're doing is being calculated down to a entirely unrealistic significance, that there's no way that anyone could possibly count on all of these things falling into line, and yet they're here to rob the Federal Reserve of the world's gold supply. Now, this would be a great movie in 1921 when we had this thing called the gold standard, which is basically that all money was pegged to a physical amount of gold, and the countries kept that in order to kind of like, keep the value of their currency. Anyway, boring economics. That doesn't exist. It's not the world that we live in anymore, and I do not understand why. This got past the first draft of the script, because it makes no sense. It makes no sense.
A very basic thing. So, like, let's talk about the other Die Hard films just briefly, like in terms of what they're trying to do. The first movie, Hans Gruber is trying to rob the Nakatomi Corporation of like untraceable currency, isn't he?
Yes.
And the idea is he does it on Christmas Eve because he knows that the people with the codes are going to be there, and he thinks that, they can get away with it basically, and get away clean, and they'll disappear and they'll be able to spend this money. Right, very reasonable. Ross, I know you're writing your memoirs, but what's the bad guy in the second movie after?
Oh, the even less. He basically he's after money, essentially. Like, you think this guy is poorly written. The guy from Die Hard 2, it's
kind of counter to my point there, buddy, but go on.
Well, sorry. Essentially, the only thing I remember from the bad guy character from Die Hard 2 is that there was like a full 2-minute segment of him doing yoga naked. And like there was a proper like 30-second segment of just his bare arse in the moonlight.
I mean, better than what we get from Jeremy Irons.
Stop bad-mouthing Jeremy Irons, all right? The guy, he had a lot to do. Fucking, I don't know what you guys like got a hard on, like fucking trashing Jeremy Irons and don't have it.
Anyway, the second movie, as far as Ross has said, like the guy's trying to like ransom this plane for money, basically. Like that's the idea there. And this third movie, like rather than the first movie where the bad guys are trying to steal a bunch of money and get away and like live it large, or the second movie where the bad guys are trying to steal a bunch of money and like get away large, this movie, this guy is seemingly trying to like fucking upend the entire world economy. Also, seemingly this guy and his 60 or 70 my closest pals don't really have like any concept of gold value. If you steal, someone look up what the weight of gold this is. If you steal, like probably what signifies probably let's say like a third of the entire world's gold reserves. Like the price of gold is going to go way down if you flood the market with 187 billion pounds of gold.
Do not, like, Dave.
But that's what I'm saying. See, and that is where this movie, Sam, may as well have been written by an 8-year-old because it has an 8-year-old's understanding of like why a bad guy would want to do this.
It's hold on.
I'm going to hold my hand up. I'm going to hold my hand up and say, "Yep, guilty." Because
guilty.
Only until
you
guys pointed it out, I was like, I didn't even consider. Oh shit! Yeah, if they steal all the gold, then what's the value of it? That didn't cross my mind until this episode.
What is the plan? What is the plan? Like, it's great. Okay,
well, again, Sam. It was to sell it to the country so they could buy a country. Again, to me, young Ross. Yep, checks out. Checks out.
Again, yeah. No, Ross, if you're 11, this movie's like, of course, he's gonna steal all this gold. He's gonna go to the fucking world supermarket and be like, "Hey, mate, I want a country. I've got all this gold." They're gonna go, "Of course, sir. What country
I would like?"
You have the gold for
wonderful
Albania.
We've got a special on Albania this week. Buy one, get Belarus free.
Yeah,
we could have made a better joke about two countries that are combined together and no longer aren't. But maybe
honestly, Sam, Albania's an A and Belarus.
Bosnia Herzegovina is that?
I thought that, and I couldn't remember how to pronounce Herzegovina.
Austria-Hungary. There it is. That's the joke we should have made.
Yeah. We're also a bit outdated, but whatever. Yeah. That's fine because this movie's stupid enough that gets away. Like
so exactly. So right. Oh my god. You've got all these guys. You've got like this little mini army, and there must be about 50 or 60. Big guys who are capable.
And one woman. And that's going to cause problems in your new utopian country.
Let's get to that. So you've got all these people in there. You've got these guys who are up for it, and they are disciplined. They do they do to the minute because they're German. What they're told, there's just so much.
I bet Germans are as slacky and fucking badly organised as the rest of us, Sam.
No, they're not.
Stop perpetuating positive racist stereotypes.
they're able to get all these trucks in, tons and tons of trucks. They're able to basically sneak all these guys in with massive German accents and jaws. And no,
yeah, hello. I am here to see the bank.
Nobody bats an eye. So you've got all this muscle, you've got all this ability, and what do you do? What do you choose to do with it? In a world, and even in '95, primarily digital banking. Like we're not talking about that. There's bunches of cash floating around as much, even if they were 10 years earlier. By the '90s, we are really into that era of the digital stock market, digital currency, all of this stuff. Hold on, Ross. And what do you choose to do? You choose to funnel all of this clearly impressive logistical operation into stealing just hundreds of tons of gold, hundreds and hundreds of tons. Wait for it. In the middle of the most populous city in the Western Hemisphere. Which I think is a really important point. It's not just stealing gold.
Sam, It's
from
because it
Fort
had more
Knox.
gold than Fort Knox.
It's not just stealing gold from Fort Knox. It's stealing gold from a fucking peninsula, right? That you need to drive out of either north all the way up through New York, which is what they end up doing, or they use tunnels. Could they have gone through the Hudson River? All of these questions, all of these bridges,
with a large amount of the heaviest metal on Earth,
which everyone's
the
looking for.
densest, hardest to transport,
Well, the good
easiest
news,
to
Sam,
identify.
the good news, Sam, is you might be a fan of Die Hard 4.0. They very much lean into the digital aspect of things. So,
I'm not suggesting-
obviously lessons were learned. Lessons were learned. Okay, next week, Die Hard 4.0. Fine, you twisted my arm, Sam.
Yeah. It actually, for a serious point, John McTiernan directed this as well. So, like he's there. This guy knows action movies. And I think as we've talked about already, and as we learned from Die Hard, the best bit about Die Hard is that it's grounded. It's relatively grounded. What makes it such a good film is that we have John McClane and he loses his shoes. And that turns the film into such a different thing, such a new thing, because he's vulnerable. And it's about the small details. It's about, can he get a machine gun? Can he find, he's got bleeding feet, and that's a horrible thing to have. It's the small details that matter, that make up the genius of that film. And in this, we get just total disregard for that, because what they're interested in is spectacle. Is it impressive that they have all this gold? I don't find it particularly impressive. I just wonder what they're going to do with it. It just raises more questions every single scene.
It feels like this script should really have ended up as a Lethal Weapon movie, because it works better in that role. Riggs in this thing where he shoots fucking 13 people. That's just Tuesdays for Riggs. John McClane is on the outs with his wife. What have we been watching 2 movies of him fucking reconciling with his wife for then? I've watched 2 movies of him have been on the outs with Bonnie Bedelia, and now he's on the outs with her again. Really?
Can I? The script was ultimately intended as a film entitled Simon Says, originally positioned as a Brandon Lee vehicle, with the character Zeus written as an actress in mind. Warner Brothers bought the script.
Awkward. What year is this? 95?
Yep.
Whoops.
Yep.
Warner Brothers bought the script and rewrote it as a Lethal Weapon sequel, and then put it in turnaround, only to be purchased by Fox and rewritten as a Die Hard film. I've been waiting for ages to drop that in. So you're exactly right. Exactly right. It needs a bigger film, bombastic, more kind of crazy. Still, I don't think even in the Lethal Weapon film, stealing all the gold doesn't really work. It works in a 1960s James Bond movie.
Have you seen Lethal Weapon 4, Sam?
I have not. No.
Maybe save your judgment until then.
Okay.
Yeah, fair enough. And we'll get to it, I'm sure, because that is right up our fucking street.
Yep.
But let's not talk about the gold anymore. But the last point is this fucking trip to Canada, and as if they're going to go over the border from America into the lawless, desolate wasteland that is Canada, where
the Mad Max world.
Yeah, where it's fine. You made it across the border, no problem. There's no Canadian police. They won't bother. With it. It's just
Mounties, Sam. They're all riding around on horses. What are they going to do against Apaches?
It's just that guy from Due South, just him walking around. There's no. It doesn't make any sense. And then even
can we talk about the scene in Canada where Albert Gruber, or what was his name?
Simon. It's Simon Gruber.
Is it Simon? Simon Gruber. Simon Says. Simon Gruber. This guy has too many names, by the way. If he's I know Ross, because the CIA tell us he's his actual name is he was born
Peter Krieg.
Peter Krieg, but actually he's fucking Alfred. It's not Alfred. I don't know why I keep saying Alfred, but it's not Simon. That's just the name he's using. So anyway,
Simon Peter Gruber. That is literally he's Hans Gruber's brother.
Simon Peter Gruber, brother of Hans Gruber. Anyway,
so anyway, Hans Gruber
he's gotten away with it. He's gotten away with it, right? He's gone to Canada with his gold, and he's like, right, this is far enough, lads. We can stop here while I bang my girlfriend, who's somehow in this movie. We'll talk about this character, right? So then we get seemingly so that like Bruce Willis can cock block him from a helicopter, seemingly. And I'm like, I don't know what's happening. Why are we doing any of this? Like, take the gold and go.
Yeah.
I mean, we raised this before we began recording, but it's I suppose now is as good a time to bring it up. But Sam, what I said before, what really made me laugh was the text I got from you the following day. Wait, he's in Canada now? And then again, it was one of those things where when you're young, yeah, that totally makes sense. Yeah, he went to Canada to get the bad guys. But then when
he
you
went over the border, that's an insurmountable thing. He's safe now.
But just again, when you begin to just look at it a tiny bit, a New York City detective recently just come out of suspension. So that, by the way, that paperwork hasn't cleared yet. So technically,
alcoholic as well.
Alcoholic, yeah.
He shot 12. He shot 13 people. This
rife with PTSD. Managed to commandeer not only the vehicle but also the pilot of a helicopter to take them into Canada. For some reason as well, take Sam Jackson's character, a civilian, along with them for reasons.
Yeah.
Armed with a pistol, no backup, and he's going to take on these East German former paramilitary guys. And just it's delicious.
But even right. So yeah, they're in Canada. That's fine. But let's not forget. We had an entire sequence that lasts about 10 minutes of them on this tanker as well. You know,
we haven't even mentioned the boat.
And I mention it because number one, this should be cut from the film. Like, just say they've driven to Canada, right? They just somehow create something that says they've driven to Canada. Fine, we're in Canada now. If you really want to do that, that's fine. But what they say is that the gold is loaded onto the tanker, and so everyone, you know, the only police officer in 1,000 miles, in Bruce Willis, jumps on the tanker with a civilian for some reason. They get captured. The tanker blows up, and then they, of course, realize that none of the gold is on the tanker. This is what Wikipedia tells me, because I actually couldn't really follow this when I was watching it.
I kind of followed it, Sam, but not really, because it's like the big guy who's beating up Bruce Willis, right? This is confusing. Ross, can you explain this to me? So the big guy beating up Bruce Willis, he goes into one of these crates. He thinks the gold's on board, picks it up, and he's like, this isn't gold. They go to the boat, and he gets shot and murdered when he questions the guy. And I'm like, why isn't he in on the plan? Like, you're blowing this boat up. Why isn't this guy like in on it?
I can't explain that. So obviously, not obviously, but
that's
yeah.
Can I get my pen?
Pretty clear to me.
Quite elementary, Dave, if you watch the movie. But this character was, I suppose you'd call it an idealist. So Hans employed him and his soldiers to do this under the guise that they're actually doing this for the people. The woman who, what's his name? Simon, then gets it on with later in the movie is her brother. So basically, Hans cuts the deal with him and the sister, betrays him, gets the sister in on the act. So that's how they're able to keep all their minions, because the sister's on board with it. But the guy thought that they were sending a message to the American capitalist dogs or whatever. The message
he was trying to crash the world economy. That's what he says. Is I'm going to destabilize the Western economy by sinking all of this gold in the bottom of the ocean. And let's not forget that gold does not ever tarnish. So
in the bottom of the ocean, but like actually in the bottom of New York Harbor, it's probably not that difficult to dredge it back up.
It's an inconvenience.
Yeah, it's costing them money. Sure, it's expensive, but like,
they're
doing the life.
But let's glean 1% of this gold from the various countries that we've saved it from, who are somehow still relying on this, and then we're all fine. Everything's good. We've paid for the cleanup operation. So that's stupid. But then, of course, that's not the reason he's doing it. He actually wants to keep it. Now, this. It's confusing, and it's not particularly good podcasting us describing this, but I think actually, hold on, Dave. Actually, hold
on.
This is the problem with the film. This is a real fundamental problem with this script. Is that there is just way too many threads. There's way too much going on, and
when
we're
there was
presented,
no need for that, was there?
No, there's no need for this. There's no need for the tanker scene. There's not really a need for the school scene, because what it sets off is it sets off a story arc that needs to be resolved. You know, the resolution of the school thing, they kind of try and do it with the bit where they rescue the kids. But then when we're ultimately told, actually, there was no bomb, it's okay. Or there was a bomb, but it was, like, it's just spraying on the guy and he can taste it. It tastes like sugar or whatever. So that, again, that doesn't really resolve in a satisfying way. And it's one thing for your film to attempt to write something and then it not resolve in a satisfying way. Like, okay, sometimes things just don't work out and you didn't have time and you couldn't shoot this scene, etc. Fine. But when you have a script full of storylines that are intended to not resolve in a satisfying way, like the schools, like the tanker, like so many things of this movie, it's just, I think it's just so sloppy. It's so sloppy to basically set up disappointment because, actually none of that mattered. That's kind of what the film is
messy.
saying again
it's
and
messy,
again.
Sam. And the conclusion of it is that we get this horribly anticlimactic. And you know me, I'm a sucker for a helicopter scene. This is not good helicoptering.
You've got a helicopter fetish, I think, Dave.
Yeah. And this is not getting me going at all, honestly. And there are two helicopters fighting. So
punching each other.
The conclusion of this movie is that this guy's got Albert Gruber's got a MG or something on his helicopter. So he's like shooting at Bruce Willis, and Bruce was like, "Oh my god, he's shooting at us!" So he has the pilot land and drop him off. So that they don't get shot, like surely making a really fucking easy target for Kruger to kill them. Anyway, and then again, like middle, he has fucking 4 hours to look. Yeah, I'm doing this on the camera, and obviously this is an audio podcast. He has 4 hours to look up at the power lines, and then look back at the helicopter, and then look up at the power lines, and then he's like, "I've only got 2 bullets left," and he shoots the power lines. And the helicopter blows up, and you're like, number one, huh?
Mm-hmm. I get
number two, what? And number three, like, it's not satisfying. Like, have fucking Bruce Willis shoot this guy in the dick.
That's a 90s trope, though, Dave. That's a 90s trope. You have to forgive this movie some things.
I don't, Ross. I don't have to.
Come on.
No, you
don't. How many 90s action movies have a really fucking stupid death? Do you know, like we've watched, It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, where the guys remake Lethal Weapon 4, and Danny DeVito's character is shot into this electric turbine, obviously parodying, these 90s movies. It's a stupid death. I know, Ross,
absolutely. This is a big franchise. It costs a lot of money to make, Ross. This is not some schlocky fucking churn it out for 5 million and then see how it does movie. This is a big budget
90 million
movie. In a franchise that's done well. Like, think about Lethal Weapon with the diplomatic immunity one, whichever one that one is, right?
That's two. Like, Lethal Weapon 2.
The bad guy gets shot, and there's some gravitas there. Mm-hmm. Like, it's corny and it's cheesy and it's ridiculous, but like we get to say, like, fucking, diplomatic immunity revoked, whatever he says, and shoot him.
Yeah.
Like,
we've done
there's
this
some
before.
Gravitas there. There's putting putting a cap on that. This movie fucking like lurches into an ending, and the writers said, right, it's over 2 hours, we need to film an ending, and they film it, and it's just unsatisfying.
We've done this before. Hold on.
What do you mean? What do you mean we've done this before? Tell me, Sam. What have we done before?
What's the best shot of Die Hard? What is the single best shot of Die Hard?
This Academic Plaza.
Oh yeah,
Exactly. Now that is a death. That is a death, and especially the production of, that Alan Rickman didn't know that he was going to fall at that exact
thrown off a skyscraper. Yeah.
So you get
he's no longer witness, of course.
Come on. We've seen this in a Die Hard movie. But this was a reshoot.
Hang on. You said one bit. Let me comment on that. But you guys have said yourself, it's not like these movies were written. And now John McClane's story takes a turn. It was a script that's been passed around pillar to post, reworked, remodeled, and then basically slapped with a title of Die Hard 3. Sorry, Die Hard with a Vengeance. So it's not like there was meticulous writing going on here. I don't disagree. It's a stupid, it's a shitty, unrewarding.
I'm really confused, Ross. At what point you're arguing?
Are you arguing for our point, or
I understand you like this movie, Ross, and I also will say,
I'm telling you, what I'm saying is I agree with you, but what I'm saying is the movie's
sound like it.
The movie's almost 20 years old. It's a mid-90s movie. Sam, yes, you're right. Die Hard, yes, broke the mold. But like we said, they're not writing John McClane's next chapter. They've just slapped it on. Die Hard was from... That's what I'm saying. Die Hard was from the 80s. Die Hard with a Vengeance is a mid-90s average script with Bruce Willis in there, with John McClane's character in there. Let it go. Cut it slack.
No, we have a podcast. I'm not letting anything.
Fuck you.
So
all the things you're saying are right.
Hold on, Dave. Hold on, because there's a reason for this. There's an actual explanation as to why this is so shit. This ending was a reshoot because they had a different ending, which was kind of. Let me just bring it up here. It's basically. There was a scene between Jeremy Irons and Bruce Willis set sometime after the events in New York, and that he'd basically the idea is that Jeremy Irons had got away with it. He'd managed to get away with the gold, and so we get this kind of fade from black scene where Bruce Willis is walking around with a trench coat on, kind of going. He confronts and manages to find Jeremy Irons, and then we get this strange mirror from the start of the movie where McClane says instead of Simon says, using quote a formal Russian roulette with a small Chinese rocket launcher that has had the sights removed, meaning it's impossible to determine which end is which. McClane then asks Simon some riddles similar to the ones he played in New York. When Simon gets it wrong, McClane forces him at gunpoint to fire the launcher, which fires a rocket through Simon, killing him. So, that was, I think, the original intent. I know
that's really hard boiled for a Die Hard movie.
Well, this is brilliant. This is what Fox said. They were like, "Nope, we're not having our character." Basically torture this man into...
Yeah, murder's fine, but we can't have him, fucking burning people's toes and...
Well, they argued, and probably correctly, that it's too sadistic, and it didn't feel as a climax, because there wasn't really, an action... There wasn't that action set piece to kind of finish off the film.
Fucking hell.
Yes, I know. Now, I think it's probably the right choice to not have that as the ending. Mm-hmm. I think it is. It doesn't really fit in the mold. It doesn't fit with the mold of the first film either, where we get to see that climactic moment.
It doesn't fit with the John McClane character, I think. There is a certain moral there. He'll murder a dozen people, no problems.
But then what do you do?
Over it, but he's not he's not a bad guy. He's not a bad guy.
But then what do you do? What do you do? Because now you're left with this gaping hole, and I think what they did is actually, when you look at what's on the screen, it's highly complex and it's very expensive. You've got sound stages, you've got helicopters, you've got camera rigs that are very high in the air. We get lots of shots of McClane running around.
You get aerial shots, of him on the ground,
either from a helicopter or from some kind of significantly, high rig. So there's loads of complexity, and it cost them a lot of money to reshoot this. And I think what we end up with is largely unsatisfying, because it comes down to him shooting a cable, and then there's not even like a kill line. We get yippee-ki-yay motherfucker completely out of context. For no, like he remembered he said that to his brother and thought that would be funny, and then he goes in American Dad sense, "Who am I talking to?" and looks around. there's no one else here, and so I think it's just a symptom of this being a kind of shortcut movie. This is what it is. It's lazy. It's just about shortcuts. It's about how do we get to the conclusion that we want as fast as possible, and you see it throughout the film, and I think that's I don't understand how that happens. I really don't understand how that happens when you've got $100 million on the line.
It's like the trouble is, and Ross, I really am not having a go at this movie unduly.
I'm taking
aside from the fact that
go on.
It's a movie we watched that was bad, irrespective of it being a Die Hard movie, irrespective of your weird nostalgia for this movie, like it's discordant, and the reason it is because it's a sequel. It's the third in a series that is like ultimate aim now is to continue to make money. Like the first one, amazingly did loads of money, and like wow, people want this character, but Hollywood doesn't fucking know what to do with this this character.
But the only problem with squaring that circle, Dave, is, and like I said, because we are agreeing with each other for the most part, but the thing is, the first hour, fuck you, you're so right. The first hour of the movie is fucking, it's quality. Do you know what I mean? Sam agrees, you agree, and it's just how do you drop off that cliff? So
well, how do we do it then? How do we do it? How do we fix it?
Go on then, Ross. Have you got a fix for this movie?
No.
Let me.
You go first, Sam.
I'll give you a minute to think. So, I think the fix for this is you've got your Simon Says stuff, and like you say, Dave, it's kind of Speed. When did Speed come out? What year was that? I can't remember. We just did it recently. 95,
93, maybe
92. Yeah, it's earlier, isn't it? So you kind of already got that there. But then Speed is very different. Speed is the boss that can't slow down, and it's kind of not really what
the school that can't not blow up.
Yeah, the telephone bit isn't really that important to the rest of the film. So I think you lean on this Simon Says stuff, and I think basically just cut your runtime down. Make it an hour and 45 minutes, and I think you've got a really satisfying movie in there. And what I would do is I'd make the psychology of the of Jeremy Irons' character much more central. Get rid of probably keep the school bombing in there, but get rid of everything else. Get rid of Canada, get rid of the gold, get rid of the German stuff. All of that goes, and what you're left with is Hans Gruber's brother, who is a total failure. He's he's like he always want, and we'll get a scene at the end where he always wanted to be like his brother, and Daddy always loved Hans more.
Maybe he has a picture of Alan Rickman in his wallet.
Yeah, Daddy always loved
falling
Hans.
from the tower.
How did you get this? Daddy always loved Hans more, and I just wanted to avenge him because he was just something that gives the character a bit of backstory, but make him totally utterly pathetic. So he's doing all these things, and that actually he's not able to carry them out. So it's all about the threat. And I think if the conclusion of the movie is John McClane basically just says, I'm not. He doesn't have the same thing. He doesn't earn the same death that Hans Gruber gets because this guy, this Simon Gruber, is just a total loser. Make him a loser. And basically, McClane says, "Fuck you. You're not worth my time. I'm not going to bother with you." Yeah. And that's I think that will be a kind of different take. And so the Simon Says stuff is the central part of the movie. And
I'm on board with you for the most part of that, Sam. The only sort of hole I would see in that is if he's such a loser, and a fuck up, how would he orchestrate some of these explosions in the first place? That's again, it's a minor thing.
One explosion.
So I'm pretty much in parallel with you, Sam, other than a few differences. So I agree. I would keep the Simon Says thing, keep him as Hans Gruber's brother. Like you, keep the school scene, drop everything else, and just have the school as the closing scene where John McClane, when he goes to the bank, he actually manages to thwart their robbery attempt somehow, and then basically so that his last thing is I'm going to get the last word and blow up this school. You have the final showdown in the school. Sam Jackson, for some reason, he's the one now disarming the bomb for some reason. Because John McClane drags him around.
That's a good enough justification for everything else in this movie that we saw for some reason.
But I just see, it would be a lot more sort of climactic having that sort of that final showdown in the school. The sprinklers are going for some reason. Pulls up the gun, boom, damn, yippee-ki-yay, Mr. America.
Yeah, could be it. Yeah. I like it. You guys are right. Slimming this movie down and punching it up would be a great way of resolving it. I have a bit of a different take on how you fix this movie.
Well, shit, Dave, let's hear it.
Well, do you know what I found intriguing when I heard it for the first time on this podcast, because I missed it in the movie? Like, let's destabilize the US economy. Oh, that's interesting. That's an interesting idea, right? Now, what if this movie, Bruce Willis, John McClane, he's suspended or he's been fired from being a cop and he's an alcoholic or whatever, and he stumbles upon or like is somehow involved in or like maybe implicated in a crime, and that he's implicated in the crime by Jeremy Irons, who's the bad guy in this movie. He's an East German, blah blah blah. Let's not make him Hans Gruber's brother because honestly, the familiar connection is just too much. Let's just say he knew Hans Gruber. They were all terrorist buddies, right? And he's like, while I'm in New York, I'm going to fuck this guy's shit up, killing my buddy, right? So you have John McClane stumble onto like some crime that's happening, some plot to destabilize the American financial system, like either by blowing up the Federal Reserve or something. Like there's a MacGuffin you could think of like blowing up like some of the biggest banks, so all the records would be gone and like people would panic about mortgages and what they own and whatever, things like that. And basically the plot of these East German terrorists is to destabilize the American economy, to scare the American public, to cause riots in New York, and to steal something, like whatever. It doesn't really matter what, but it's all a ploy. And you can still have those layers of like some of these East Germans are, idealists and they want to destabilize the US. Some of these East Germans are just greedy sons of bitches, my kind of guys, and they just want the money. And John McClane stumbles upon it, but guess what? He's been fired from the police, so no one believes him. No one will listen to him. And then you can have I don't know how you'd fit Samuel L. Jackson into this movie, but then you can have John McClane trying to take down these guys without the help of the police, without having to spend what felt like 4 hours explaining why the police have turned all the radios off and can't be reached by telephone and are all in a school in fucking Manhattan, checking on the floorboards. And do you know what I mean? And then you can legitimately explain why John McClane is going after these guys and punch it up a bit, because there is something to be said. We watched Ronin, obviously. There is something about post the fall of communism, you suddenly got a lot of highly skilled, highly trained, mercenaries, basically. Suddenly no one's paying them. That is interesting. That we've seen that several times of there's something to be explored here. And you could have a John McClane story. You could have a Die Hard movie about John McClane fucking killing East German mercenaries. Again, like in the first one, but in a much more I've got to stop them blowing up X, I've got to stop them blowing up Y. And it would maybe require a much bigger rewrite than what you guys have suggested. But that, for me, that's the more interesting nugget. Or alternatively, just make a buddy cop movie. Just make a buddy cop movie with Samuel L. Jackson and Bruce Willis, and just make it funny.
Yeah.
Maybe have Bruce Willis be racist. Great. Because then Ross, then he gets to learn a lesson at the end. You're not massively racist, but you can have him saying things, and at the end he can be like, actually, I really like this guy, and learn a lesson.
Maybe not something that Bruce Willis would want to agree. Well, no, but I think it's a good take. I like it as a change. I think our version, me and Ross's version, is trying to salvage. It's trying to salvage what's there, isn't it? And
we're losing him. Whereas mine's sharpening the knives. This kidney's going there, and that heart's going there.
Yeah. And I think the writer...
You're very much donating the organs to another movie.
Can you sign this? Sign this so we can use your organs
with a rusty saw, just carving out.
Whereas we're doubling down. We can bring it back. I think Jonathan Hensley, who was the writer for this, basically said that the first hour of this movie was perfectly matched his script for this Simon Says movie, this, and then from there the problems. So I think that you could start off, to salvaging it works in that sense, because there's a solid film there that we've all liked the first hour of this. I think your idea though is good though, because it kind of reframes it, and it's almost taking what happens at the far end of the film and bringing that forward, because we don't get any of the stuff at the end of the movie at the beginning. We get no hint, and to actually go back to the film itself now, we get no hint of this attempt of by the Germans to destabilize the economy, or what even really what they want. Everything we know is related. Hold on, Dave. Let me just finish it. 2 seconds. Everything we know about the characters comes from the first hour of the movie, which in effect is an entirely separate film, and then this other stuff is bolted on.
Well, it is bolted on. Sorry, can I say my point now? The fact that they're East German apparently was like quite a late addition to the movie.
Right.
Initially, they were just like pan-European, like there were some Hungarians and Polish guys, and I think there's a Polish guy. You remember when they first go in? There's a guy who doesn't speak English.
Yeah,
and they're all making fun of him because they're German and he's Polish, and that's kind of like a holdover from when I think initially it was going to be like just a bunch of ex-Soviet state like mercenaries, like doing a crime, and a bit different. And the East German thing was, I think, like an attempt to tie it back to the first movie, and tie it back to Hans Gruber. And again, and in a sequel, that's always a crutch when you feel like you're. And I think the John McClane character in the premise is strong enough, but they obviously felt they needed this kind of like callback. Bonnie Bedelia said no. I think that's a big thing as well. Like, she did not want to come back for this, so we don't get any of his family. So they needed something to tie it back to that movie that made loads of money for the fans, so you can go, oh, that's Thuts and Thuts, blah, 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 blah. And I think the Die Hard movies, and obviously Ross, you're our resident Die Hardist. I know that's the word I'm using on the podcast, but I think there was also a script, I think maybe involving his daughter in this one, because I know that his son appears in one of the later movies.
Yeah.
His daughter appears in Die Hard 4.0. So Sam, you're in there, and then it's his son.
And is that the last one, or is that the next one?
No. So again, I'll go through it. Die Hard 2, subtitled Die Harder. I'm not joking. Boogaloo. Yep. Die Hard 3.
Die Hard 3, the quickening.
Sorry, not 3. Not 3. Die Hard with a Vengeance. Then Die Hard 4.0.
Die Hard with a Vengeance. Die Hard 3, the quickening. Is that the full title of the film?
Die Hard 4.0, and then it's Die Hard: A Good Day to Die Hard.
What year was A Good Day to Die Hard, Ross?
Sorry, is it really Die Hard: A Good Day to Die Hard?
Sorry, no, it's
not.
A Good
Right,
Day.
Good. At least they've given us that.
I'm checking, Dave. 2013.
Yeah.
Wow, 2013.
We are old. Time has passed.
Is Bruce Willis like de-aged CGI wise in that movie, Ross, or is he just like 70 years old?
He's decrepit as fuck.
It's called being rich. That's what it is. I'd like to go back to my intro. And the concept of it's Die Hard on a plane, it's Die Hard in a building, which apparently I've heard this story and I can't remember where, that basically some Hollywood executive was pitching this movie and they had a great idea, and they said in full seriousness, oh, it's Die Hard in a building, as if I can't remember if I heard that. Maybe in a different podcast, but anyway. That silliness, saying it's Die Hard on a boat or it's Die Hard on a plane, whatever else. As much as that's silly, as much as that doesn't really reflect the complexity of all movies, you also kind of need to appreciate and respect the fact that you understand what that is straight away. Like when you say it's Die Hard on a plane with snakes, oh my God, am I in? And then you say you've got Samuel Jackson, hell yes, fantastic. It works. It totally works as a shorthand for what this movie is. Now, what a movie is. When the problem I have, I think, my conclusive thoughts is that when you try and distill this movie down to a single sentence, what is this? What movie? How do you sell me this in an elevator pitch when you've got 8 seconds, and it's Bruce Willis on the phone? Okay, I'm kind of peaked. But then what happens? Nothing much else. Loads of other stuff. You can't pin it down. You can't pin it down to an individual kind of summary. When you talk about, say, Con Air, it's a plane full of criminals flying. Trying to escape. Straight away, I get it. Armageddon. It's a bunch of drillers who have to go to space to destroy.
It's Bruce Willis in space.
Totally.
It's Die Hard in space.
Yeah.
It's Die Hard in space. Exactly. Like
Hans Gruber asteroid. He was the cousin.
Yeah. And Speed, it's the boss that won't slow down. Like we get it. We understand it straight away. And I think this is the problem with this film is it's just, you can't define it in those short terms, which means
it's ultimately confusing. It's a confusing movie. And I will say, to be positive at the end of this podcast, I really liked the interplay between Willis and Jackson in this movie. And which we said, I really enjoyed the first hour. I really enjoyed a lot of this movie. Not to shit on, we have to shit on it for a long time, but
I'm hurt.
it kind of is
you
fun.
two have. Just don't bring it here.
Well, sorry, Ross, you were writing your memoirs. You didn't speak for about 45 minutes. This is a fun movie in the main part. The trouble is that the worst bit is at the end, and you always remember the end better than you remember the beginning.
That's a good point.
And if the first half hour of this had been dog shit, I bet we would have a much more positive opinion, Sam and I, of it than we do now. And that is because it leaves a taste in your mouth. Not necessarily a bitter taste, but like a...
I disagree. You two are sour bastards. Doesn't matter how good the ending was. If the first hour was bad...
Ross, I cannot wait until we watch a movie that Sam or I recommended from our childhood and you're the agitator. You're like in the corner.
I'll bring a bib. Just like tuck it in. Okay.
He's got his like lobster utensils. Those crushes. Just I'm eating tonight, boys.
Smearing myself in butter.
Meat's back on the menu. That's a Lord of the Rings reference. You should maybe watch
amazing. But this has been quite a long episode. Fun movie to do though, and like we do talk quite frequently about renaming our podcast just like 90s action movie podcast. But that's somehow even more unwieldy than the crap name we have now.
Well, I mean, we could do Imaginary Movie Podcast Harder, or A Good Day to Podcast.
Imaginary with a Vengeance.
Podcast 2.0.
Podcast 2.0 would be good, yeah.
Podcast with a Vengeance. I actually love that.
Fucking who knew?
Search Spotify for that.
Buy that domain name now.
Podcast with a Vengeance.
Well, I should say, continuing this tradition of doing like really singular. Well, this isn't, I suppose, singular, but Die Hard as a franchise is very evocative, very singular. Next week we will be watching Highlander, which.
Hold on.
Yeah.
For the audio listeners, Ross had a look of excitement and almost arousal on his face. My face was much more like my face was much more like like I just ripped a plaster off a wound that's still quite sore. God, no.
Exactly. But I have seen this movie 100,000 times, and I've seen loads of the sequels. Loads. Is it the fourth one? We'll get into this next week, but like Highlander is a fun movie about fucking immortal people playing with swords, and it's amazing. So we'll get into that because I guess it may not hold up, but boy, I hope it does. And Ross's rampant nostalgia will be back.
Well, the thing is with Highlander, I've only actually seen literal like bits and pieces of it because that was one of the late movies, so I wasn't able. I couldn't stay up late. Not that I wasn't allowed. I physically couldn't. I was too tired. But, So I'm really looking forward to watching this for the first time in its entirety.
It's a cool movie, as I recall, and I saw it a few years ago. I would make a request, Ross, that you write your impeachment speech before the podcast next week.
Well, this all sounds great, guys.
Write down a couple of notes for the benefit of the podcast.
For half an hour, Ross. Sam and I were like,
fucking arsehole. 10 minutes max. I was just writing some stuff down, things I was going to talk about. And then these guys here
go through the podcast, right? You've got the 3 audio feeds, and you edit it, right? I want you to go through and tell me
your very, very
how
available time.
Before Ross says anything.
2 kids. Make sure you go through the podcast just to prove this point.
I'll tell you what. I'll go through your audio, which will be on the folder, and I'll fucking tell you.
My pettiness to knows no bounds, so don't worry about that.
It does. I know it does. Don't threaten me with that.
You guys
you've always threatened us with editing like bits out. This was how I got it out.
To be fair, Sam, you haven't got a lot of believability on that.
Anyway, you guys carry on this argument. What I'm going to do, I'm going to tuck in. I'm going to get a nice blanket. I'm going to get maybe a nice cup of tea or a bottle of wine. Sit down and read the novelization of Die Hard with a Vengeance, which is available in all good bookstores. No, that's not a joke. There was a novelization of this film, which apparently goes into...
It's not available in bookstores. I challenge you to go and find it.
It apparently goes into some of the kind of darker stuff with John McClane, some of the backstory with Zeus, and then concludes with the ending that we talked about with the rocket launcher suicide murder thing. So, it's a nice little Friday evening for me, and I'm sure for the listener, it will be something to enjoy after they've watched this trash fire of a movie.
I definitely recommend the bottle of wine watching this trash fire of a movie. Though.
No, for the book. Dave, for the book. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, sorry, that too. I was reading a book. Number one, they've had to watch this film, then listen to our podcast, then to read a book. Come on, Sam. No one's following that trajectory.
I can't believe this is the first time I'm hearing of a novelization of Die Hard. My life. What is my life but a lie?
Fantastic. Thank you.
Next week on the Imaginary Book Club.
Right. We'll see you next week.